welcome to this week's Property Matters on Dublin South FM, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iProperty Radio or by email at hello@ipropertyradio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon. Due to ongoing COVID-19 restrictions, we are still recording remotely, so apologies for any poor sound quality. So first up, I'm delighted to be joined on the line by Patrick Folan, Director of I Am Sold and regular guest on the show. Although, Patrick, it has been a while since we've spoken last and things have changed a lot since we've spoken last.
It has indeed. I think the last time I was due to come to Dublin to meet you, but those days are gone now. So we're definitely in a different time zone than the last time we spoke. But look, we're in business. We're busy, thankfully, right now, and just trying to get our heads around what the future holds, I suppose.
Yeah, do you know, these are such interesting times. Over the past 4 months, we've endeavoured to keep the show on the road, and in fact, if anything, it's actually kind of pushed us to innovate our own recording a little bit more. So, like, for example, last week I was joined for the same interview by somebody from founders of an Irish Proptech startup that are based in Dublin and Galway, but the callers were coming in from Berlin and Warsaw, and I was recording from Wicklow. So, you know, it's great that we've actually been able to do this as opposed to all trying to gather in a Dublin studio. So in some ways, it has really opened up things, and I think that really translates into the property market as well. But
absolutely, yeah. And I suppose on that point, I think we've all embraced technology a little bit more. We're a company who would be kind of that way inclined anyways, but your Zoom calls, your online meetings, they're really part of the business now, whereas maybe 6 months ago they weren't. So I think we've all changed, and that hopefully would be good for the business in the long run as well.
Yeah, Patrick, as a director of I Am Sold, most people will be familiar with I Am Sold as one of the nationwide auction houses. So actually you were very much ahead in terms of the trends for online auctions. So, I mean, you were among the first in Ireland offering online only auctions. And from that point of view, you've probably dealt with a lot of the teething issues that maybe some traditional auctioneers and estate agencies have been trying to navigate over the past number of months. So when was your first online auction?
Yeah, so yeah, as you say, we're ahead of the curve. About 8 years ago, we had the first online auction. So I suppose we're well ahead of the curve in terms of that side of things. Now, I suppose we have done a lot of changes to the system over the years. So yeah, we've had to tweak and had to improve it, I suppose, as time went along. But in terms of our initial startup was in 2012, 2013. So, you know, I suppose we're kind of 8 years in now to online auctions. We have been running online auctions, online only auctions without the public facility on a monthly basis anyways. And then the public auctions, which we had been running, have now gone into postponement, and we're waiting to start them again. But in fairness, we don't need to. It's a nice thing to be running public auctions, but we were already well set up to, and we're lucky enough in that sense, I suppose, that our business model allowed us to work from home, which was a big one over the last few months. Obviously, offices were closed, and our phone systems, our online systems all allowed us to work remotely as well. So we've been actually reasonably busy during lockdown. The staff were all working full time, and we've been able to do quite a number of sales even within lockdown. So I suppose that was a positive for us as well. Absolutely.
Patrick, is it fair to call I Am Sold almost like an outsourced auction department for some traditional agents nationwide?
Yeah, it would be. So we work with about 300 auctioneers now in Ireland, and we work with about 1,200 in the UK as well. So we're kind of, I suppose, all over Ireland and Northern Ireland as well. And absolutely, we provide an auction solution to existing auctioneers. We work very closely with them. We're not just here's an IT platform, go ahead and figure it out and use it. We're very much auctioneers in our own right as well. So we partner, if you like, with the auctioneers to take on the auction properties, to, I suppose, value them correctly for reserves for auction, and work with interested parties. So we would have a team that work with the buyers to, I suppose, help them through the process as well, because it is something that's new and it's a bit different, and it's, you know, maybe in the last years come to the fore a bit more. But people still are maybe a little wary of it. You know, how does it work? What do I need to do? So there is a lot of work that goes on in the background to make sure that both vendors and buyers of properties are comfortable and know what they're doing or what they need to do maybe before bidding on an online auction as well.
Yeah, that actually brings up a great point, and one that we've touched on here a couple of times over the past few months on the show. You know, we've been consistent supporters and proponents of Proptech and all sorts of technology to move all elements of the property process online. But one of the missing components really was that culture change. So in theory, everything could be done online, but we know that buyers weren't there yet. And the exception maybe are the investors who would have routinely been looking at properties through online auctions, like yourselves. So in a way, I wonder, are you kind of preaching to the choir? Are your audience, your regular buyers and investors, they're people who have been used to maybe not viewing properties and buying properties based on the digital assets shown on your platform? You know, is that something that maybe is standing to you now, that you have people who don't necessarily need to view the properties?
Yeah. Okay. It's twofold. We still deal with a lot of your investors and your cash buyers who know what they're doing, if you like, and have been through the mill with different types of purchases in the past. And I suppose, yes, quite often. Okay, during lockdown they were buying without seeing the properties, yes, but generally they would like to see the properties. I would say even that cohort of people would like to step on the floorboards, would like to smell the air around it, that there's no damp, would like to go out into the garden if there's a garden, and would like to get a sense of the property. Albeit during lockdown, we actually saw quite a number of lower end properties with lots and lots of interest, I must say. Holiday homes, cottages, even maybe smaller investments without viewings, and they went quite well, in fact. So we have had appetite for properties without viewing, but I will say more than half of our buyers now are mortgage buyers. So we're no longer in the space where we're dealing with just cash buyers and investors. So a big cohort of our buyers are now family buyers looking for a nice home. And I suppose we work through the process of buying through online auction with them more so. I suppose there's probably more of a hand-holding effort to kind of explain the process of what you need to do before bidding. And if we said to a residential buyer, they're a first-time buyer, and they don't, they haven't bought a property before, go away there and bid on an online auction, they would walk away and probably run a mile. Whereby I suppose, if you like, our efforts in the sale are to explain to them, look, it's not rocket science what you need to do here. There's a private vendor. It's not a bank sale. Most of our sales are private. There's a private vendor here. They will do business at the 200,000. Here's what you need to do to, get your bank valuer out to the property, get your surveyor out to the property. We have all the legal pack ready. If you have a solicitor, we can send it over to the solicitor straight away and kind of work through the process. There's really only 3 or 4 things they need to do in order to get them satisfied that the bank will lend, number one, get their loan offer in, and that their solicitor is happy with the title. So really there is a big portion of our workload is probably dealing with the buyers and helping them through the process, and hence we can deal with maybe a bigger portfolio of property types. Your family homes have come into our auctions a lot more in the last few years, and that's something we'd like to continue with.
Yeah, but I'm really surprised to hear you say that more than half are mortgage buyers, because the mortgage companies and the lenders in Ireland are still really sluggish in terms of supporting home buyers at auction process. So, what we've seen in the past was that, investors who were willing to bid at auction, take a chance, they were able to access finance, but they also kind of had a plan B if the mortgage didn't come through. Whereas for home buyers and first-time buyers particularly, that's something that the banks do. They didn't have a great process in place for supporting buyers through this. So has that changed in terms of the main lenders?
So it has and it hasn't, and I must preface that by saying a lot of these first-time buyers or just general mortgage buyers that we deal with, if it's a private sale and it's going to auction, say for instance we've our next Leinster auction next Thursday, there's been quite a number of deals done, and even this week there'll be quite a number of deals done before auction as well. So quite often, if there's a buyer there at the right money and there's a private vendor and they say, look, I'll take the 200,000 if you can come in with your definite bid beforehand, it gives the buyer a bit of comfort to say, okay, there's a deal here to be done, and maybe puts a bit of time constraints on them. Will the bank then play ball in terms of getting your ducks in a row? They will. You do need to maybe emphasize the timing of it, and you would need about 2 to 3 weeks. 1 week isn't enough. You would probably need ideally about 3 weeks to go through that process. But yeah, absolutely, the banks will, if they're aware of a deadline, they will help the buyer and try to expedite it, I suppose. But it's still a time-consuming process, but it can be done providing the solicitor and the surveyor and the valuer are all aware that, look, there is a deadline here, and we need to get this moving quite quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a message we really need to get out to house hunters, and particularly to first-time buyers, because I've seen it myself from over the past decade and a half that buyers automatically switch off. First-time buyers, a lot of them automatically switch off if they see it's a property that's going for auction, irrespective of whether it's an in-person or online auction. It's just not something they're comfortable with. It's not something they're educated on. And I think that they maybe aren't aware that the auction process has changed so much over the past decade here in Ireland as well. So it's definitely kind of a communication issue that we need for buyers to see that this is just another route to purchasing property and that it is absolutely accessible to them. And there's a number of things like solicitors and mortgage lenders need to play their part. It can't all be just the auctioneers as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's an important one.
It's everyone pulling together, I suppose, to make things happen faster. Our sales are going through after about 6 weeks, whereas private treaty is taking, we're between 4 to 6 weeks depending on the property, but on average, ones will push a bit longer. So it's been 6 weeks for the last probably couple of years. So that's a hell of a lot faster than your 6 months plus sometimes that private treaty is taking. And that is a problem, and it's maybe one of the reasons why I think buyers and vendors, it doesn't suit anyone to wait 6 to 9 months to get their house closed and to get moving into a house. So the process is definitely beneficial from that end if you can make it work for you.
Yeah, and look, sluggish conveyancing in Ireland and really disproportionate conveyancing delays and the perhaps Law Society's resistance to embrace technology that already exists, that's been clearly identified as a problem, and it's something that actually IPAV are actively working on now with their smart contracts. So actually there's a huge push now, whether it's for auction or traditional sales, for the conveyancing process to be tidied up, smartened up, and increasingly automated, which is what we want to see. So we know that that's something that's happening, which would be a benefit to everybody. But Patrick, I suppose really, I'd love to get a sense, because you're dealing with estate agents right across the country. What kind of sense are you getting from them, but also from their vendor clients? Are we starting to see more secondhand properties coming on the market and to auction, or are vendors a little bit nervous at the moment?
Yeah, well, there's definitely nerves out there. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we're running into an uncertain period, but I suppose from our experience since we began, viewings and fully back in the market again over the last few weeks, it's extremely, extremely busy right now, and there is a lot of pent-up demand, and I think most auctioneers are finding that the demand for properties is extremely high. So from that end, that's very positive. Obviously, we don't know how long that'll last, but right now it's very, very good. Vendors then, I suppose there definitely is nerviness, and there definitely is a lot of questions. Is it the right time? Should I come to the market? Where is the market going to go later in the year? And I suppose nobody knows, but there's probably two schools of thought right now as to where the market is going. One is there's huge appetite. The stock levels are low. You can probably, get quite a good result on your property right now. Will COVID-19 counterbalance that, and will it pull the prices down later in the year? We don't know, but there is a school of thought to say that the demand is so high, the shortage will probably be there for the rest of the year, we think. So I think it's probably, there's going to be a reasonably good year in it, and that's my sense of it, that okay, we may go through some difficulties, but it's not going to be a terrible back end to the year that maybe some people are predicting. And then I suppose the other school of thought is we might see a sharp enough fall towards the back end of the year, but a very short and sharp fall, the V shape, I suppose, as we've heard maybe on certain predictions.
See, we talk a lot about supply and demand, obviously, as being the driving forces there in the market, but what we're dealing with in the aftermath of the pandemic are people who have had their income, they've had changes to their income, albeit on a temporary basis, and the banks didn't show the flexibility that we needed. Now, I saw in the Sunday papers just the weekend gone that the banks have committed to taking a more flexible approach. So where people their income levels have changed as a result of COVID-19, but on a temporary basis, that they're going to be more flexible. But we know that that's definitely going to cause a problem going forward, that there will be people who in February had no problem securing a mortgage, that by July and August they might actually have a problem. Now, so that demand still exists, but the people who demand homes may not be able to secure a mortgage, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think it's probably, if not the most crucial point, it's up there. That the bank lending, obviously, the demand will be there. I feel if the banks don't punish people unduly, I suppose, for short-term problem, which I suppose most of the country was affected by. So I think our own experience has been reasonably good with the banks, that people who have been affected by COVID-19 and were buying maybe through us, we haven't had any sales where there's been a problem, even if, I should say, they're looking for a couple of months back on their normal wage. But once that happens, that seems to be our experience right now. Now, obviously, market reports are saying, I suppose certain banks were maybe looking at certain different approaches to it. But I think the banks have to play ball because, I think from a property perspective, it would be a big problem if there was a cohort or a large cohort of people who couldn't buy for the next 6 months or a year. And I don't think the banks want that either. I don't think it's in the bank's interest. They need to be prudent. They can't be foolish. But if it's a short-term problem and the problem is then resolved, I think the bank need to deal with that fairly.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of the crux of the matter there, and I expect that's what the approach the banks will take. But in terms of the past 4 months, did you have to cancel any auctions, or did you go ahead with all planned auctions?
We went ahead with all planned auction dates, but some of the public auctions turned into online auctions, which is what we're doing at the minute, I suppose. So the auction this week on Thursday would have been, so we have one last week, this week, and next week, and they were all due to be public auctions, which they're now all online auctions. But that's fine. It's still the same process, just people have to bid online as opposed to physically attending a public auction room.
And in terms of numbers, did you have any vendors withdraw their properties, that had previously scheduled the properties for sale?
We definitely have had, even in any time there may be a little bit of that, but it hasn't been huge numbers. I would say we have at any one time around 200 properties on the books. And now I don't have the exact figure, but I'd say it's single digits in terms of people who have actually withdrawn.
Now, apologies, Patrick, the line broke there for a moment. So could I just ask you to repeat there in terms of vendors that have any vendors withdrawn from auction over that time?
I can, Carol. Yeah, I was just saying it's been very limited. There'll always be an element of situation changes that COVID-19 or not will happen. So it hasn't been unusually high, I would say. Of the 200 properties we might be selling at one time, I would say it's less than it's single digits. It's less than 10 that have maybe made changes to their circumstances and can no longer move for some reason.
Okay, and in terms of, because I know that these are probably stats that you would track, generally speaking, do you know the average that properties going through I Am Sold, do they exceed their guide or reserve price or their advised minimum value? Do they exceed that on a routine basis?
It does. The average tends to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. I think last year was 12%. This year would probably actually, right now, a little higher. There's actually been some really strong results well above reserve. Even last week, certain properties had sold for double the reserve or 20% above reserve. It's been quite strong, particularly at the lower end of the market. There's a big jump on reserve, and there's huge appetite for properties. I think we had one in the Connacht auction last week that went in at 30,000 approximately, and it sold for over 80. And it had a huge volume of interest. And in fairness, a really strong price. It was needed complete refurbishment, a kind of a rural cottage, and wouldn't have expected that result. But nonetheless, when the volume of inquiries came in, so there's been some really strong results at the lower end. There was another property just outside of Galway City that went in at 230, sold at 285. So again, nicely above reserve. And yeah, I suppose there's good appetite. There's good appetite for all residential stuff, I would say. And I know we sold a house with a development site in Dundrum a couple of weeks ago, and that made 700,000. And that was a good, I suppose that was a development spin, if you like, that the value was in the development, not the house as such. And there was good appetite in that one. So it seems to be a lot of confidence right there in the market, and hopefully that'll continue.
That's really interesting, because I would have expected that even where properties sell, that maybe it wouldn't have exceeded the guide price as much as previously expected. So that's an interesting one. Now, when you talk about interest in rural properties, that ties in very well with not just Irish trends that we're seeing over the past month, but also UK trends that people seem to be looking for properties outside the city. Whether it's looking for more space in terms of houses, or more green space in terms of gardens, or greater property size, that they seem to be looking to rural locations. And that hasn't been a feature of the property market so much in the past decade. So that's an interesting trend that would definitely cater to a lot of the properties that you have listed through I Am Sold.
Yeah, absolutely. So there does seem to be a lot of buyers in the market looking for a move. So some of them are looking for residential moves, some of them are looking for commercial as well. There's a bit of that happening, guys, whether it be downsizing or moving location for commercial. So there is quite a bit of movement in the market at the minute. I suppose once COVID-19 hit, and people were at home, I think there was a realization that maybe working from home more often is an option, number one, but I need to be more comfortable, or I need an office space, or I need, I can maybe move out of the city, work from home 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and have a bigger property. So there definitely is a feel and a sentiment in the market that the rural properties, and that maybe the properties that were not considered suitable maybe 6 months ago are now being seriously looked at, because there's huge value once you go out of the main drags, I suppose, and the main suburbs of cities. The value increases hugely, I suppose. So you can get your 5-bedroom detached house for probably the same price as a 3-bedroom terrace in Dublin. If you go out as far as your Wexfords or your Louths or your Westmeaths, that side of the Dublin, I suppose. So there is huge value to be got if someone is willing to move out, and I think more people are now.
Yeah, well, certainly the stats, not just in Ireland but in the UK, seem to indicate that's a growing trend. So it's one that we'll definitely watch with interest. Patrick, before we let you go, you might just direct people where they can go to find information about the properties that are listed for your Leinster auction this Thursday.
Yeah, well, we have the main site, iamsold.ie, which has all the properties across Ireland. But if someone wants specifically the Leinster properties, then they can go to leinsterpropertyauction.ie.
Super. Best of luck to the team there for Thursday. We leave it there for now. Our thanks again to Patrick Folan, Director at I Am Sold. We'll take a quick break. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio, or email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. I'm delighted to be joined over the phone now by Peter Murphy, co-founder of Ziggytec. Peter, you're very welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you, Carol.
Peter, Ziggytec, that's spelled Ziggytec. You featured prominently in some of the Irish business papers in recent times. Tell us about Ziggytec.
So Ziggytec, myself and my co-founder, Peter Murphy, who is no relation of mine, we met quite a number of years ago when I was involved with ESB. I worked for ESB for 29 years, and I was head of trading in their energy trading. And I got involved with a professor using algorithms to trade energy stocks. And Kieran was using the same professor using those algorithms to trade investment stocks. And that's how we got. It was through that common contact we got to meet each other. And about 2 years ago, we decided to leave our various jobs to set up Ziggytec, because we could see that within the property sector, the need for sustainability and sustainability data was crucially important. And property managers were really struggling to get on top of their sustainability data. And that's how we founded Ziggytec.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right in identifying a trend there. It's a need that we've been talking about over the past decade, but I just don't know. There are lots of piecemeal approaches to it. So there are lots of elements of technology that deal with different aspects of it. So yours is an end-to-end solution for building and portfolio owners and operators. So you might just explain exactly how the tool works.
So yes, so we're very much focused in the commercial sector for portfolio owners and portfolio managers. And the challenge they face if they have a portfolio of 100 properties is how to know how much energy has been consumed in those 100 properties. Most of our clients would have their buildings registered for the likes of Leeds, Breen, Gresby, and things like that. And one of the key requirements of those certifications is obviously to record all their energy usage. And to record your energy usage it's a mammoth task. Like even if you think domestically, do you know what the meter registration number of your electricity and gas meter is at home? And do you know how much you use each month? Possibly you don't, Carol, do you?
I definitely don't. And raising she's not a teenager anymore. She's gone beyond that. But, when there's kids in the house as well, it's definitely something that we probably should be tracking much better, but don't.
Yeah, and how would you track it? It's all about logging onto various portals and pulling down PDF copies of your bills, et cetera, And what you'll find invariably is that there'll be estimates, not actually real readings. They tend to take the readings maybe 4 times a year. So you look at a portfolio manager who has 100 buildings, and in each building they might have 10 to 20 meters in it. It's just a huge, enormous task, paper-based task, and obviously, because it's paper-based, it's hugely prone to error. So where we came in to do, we adopted the Internet of Things. We have small devices, which are radio communication, which we put on top of the existing meters in the building. And they transmit the meter reading every hour up into the cloud. And we gather all that data together for your portfolio and summarize it. And you can log onto our portal and see which building is using what, how much they're using. We've online carbon calculators, so you know minute by minute how much carbon has been consumed by the building.
Okay.
And
how do you set a baseline?
So we're new in the game, so we're 2 years out, and we're starting to establish the baselines at the moment. And it was actually all going very well up to March, and then all of a sudden, all the buildings commercial. Their consumption dropped off a cliff. So we had a dramatic change in consumption. So it is actually, it's a difficult one now to know how do you establish a baseline. But,
I can imagine. And even for portfolio managers, it's one thing, because actually one thing that I'm very aware of when we get stats is that if you don't know what to compare them against, it's very difficult to rate your performance. So therefore, you might get the readings, but how much sense will they make to, business or to portfolio owners or operators who don't have the insights or maybe the background and knowledge that you have? Does your system prompt recommendations?
No, it doesn't prompt recommendations, but certainly what we do is one of the key KPIs would be your energy consumption per square meter of building. And that all of a sudden zones you in on, which are the buildings in your portfolio that are higher energy consumers and which are lower energy consumers. So I suppose it's important to understand that out there in the whole sustainability arena, there's various people. There's people that will invest in your building and do retrofit of LED lights and all of that. That's not our business. There's consultants out there that will advise on energy reduction. That's not our business either. Our business is actually the really tough job of getting the energy meter readings out of the basement in all these different buildings, and they're generally in terrible locations, and into clean, you said that you've accurate, consistent and reliable data streaming into your PC on your desk.
Peter, would it be fair to say, I mean, you've kind of touched on it there, some of the things that you don't do, but in terms of the businesses that go in and invest in buildings, do a retrofit, and it's always with the aim of saving on utilities. So they're effectively become partners in the future savings of utilities, and that's generally done with the very direct aim, and it has been over the past 2 decades, it's done with the very direct aim of saving money. It has been less about the sustainability and the environmental impact of the buildings. And that's really a conversation that has come to the fore more so over the past 5 years, where it's not just cost savings driving this. Actually, sustainability has become a much stronger and more important driver. So how does that change then maybe when the design and build of buildings? When we move away from just looking for cost savings to actual energy sustainability, has that had an impact on the design and build of buildings over the recent years?
I wouldn't be an expert now on the design of buildings. It's more on the energy consumption within the buildings. But you're correct in that the focus has moved from just the cost savings. So a lot of the investment initiatives are driven by subsidies and energy credits from supply companies. Okay, but what we're seeing is our customers are coming to us because they want to get their building rated. And this is really important. They want to get their building rating on, say, the likes of GRESB. And it's because the owners of the building need it rated on GRESB, because a more sustainable building is a more valuable building. And that's what's driving it. And it's the investors. And this is what I find really interesting. It's the investors. So it's the pension funds that get involved in investing in the real estate investment trusts, are saying, okay, we'll invest in your real estate investment trust, but only on the basis that you're building sustainable buildings. So it's going right back to the investor. And that's what's driving our customers.
And that's a really positive, that's Absolutely. Where you want the market to be driven.
Yeah. I started off in life, actually, 2 years ago when I set up Ziggytec, initially with a view to saying, okay, what I want to do is to do some really smart analytics on your data, so that we can help you save money, right? And we went to our clients and we were saying, this is what we want to do. And they said, geez, that's really great, Peter. I think that's a great idea. Lovely. I'd love to do it, but the only problem is I don't have the data.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I see. So that's the problem. The problem is that at the very start of the chain, you don't actually have the data. So there's loads of packages out there that'll analyze everything and draw lovely graphs. But if you don't have the data, you can't actually do anything. So that's where we started out 2 years ago, getting the data. Now we are building the algorithms on top of that data now to start analyzing it. But we really had to start at basics, get the data for the guys. So the reason the likes of GRESB certification and WELL certification are so important is they insist that you measure energy and that you get the data, because they know it's a starting point in the sustainability drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a really important point, though. It's back to that very simple old adage, what gets measured actually can be improved. But if you don't know your starting point, it's very difficult to take corrective action from there. And I suppose you're well placed there. I think that's interesting that you came from a place of actually wanting to analyse the data, but then had to go and actually organise the collection of that data yourself. So what's the kind of medium-term plan for Ziggytec? Where do you see the next 5 years going in terms of not just for Ziggytec, but actually for sustainable real estate?
So where I have my vision now for this is, if you're a property manager, a portfolio manager, it's not feasible to have energy expert in each one of your buildings. There's not enough work for them to do in each one of the buildings. What I actually see is going to happen is a portfolio manager is going to have a control center, a bit like a security control center, but a control center for energy, where they're going to be continuously monitoring the energy consumption right across the portfolio and taking corrective action immediately by ringing the property manager and saying, I noticed your water consumption has shot up over the weekend. You must have a leak. And there are some of the things we're picking out with our software already. Commercial buildings generally don't use water at nighttime or at weekends. And if you start to pick up water consumption at nighttime at weekends, it indicates that you have a leak. And that's where I see the future is. You're going to, because we can pull all the data together in one place, a portfolio manager will employ an energy consultant and a sustainability consultant to monitor their premises continuously all the time, rather than just doing spot checks every once a year or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you've actually gone into the area as well of air quality. Now that's a conversation that's really topical at the moment, both for a smart city point of view outside and also for within buildings. And this has become even more of an issue post-pandemic, because we're obviously need to be much more aware of the impact that poor quality air has on anybody with underlying respiratory illnesses. So coming from there, what is the air quality offering that Ziggytec provides?
Yeah, well, just to give you a background of the air quality, we started off about 2 years ago as well when we were doing utilities. We were asked, well, can you do air quality? Because it's a requirement for well certification for a building to say that you measure air. So we said, fine. And that was purely the driver there, that you were monitoring the air and you could prove that you're monitoring the air. The world has just changed radically in the last few months, where all of a sudden, where up to now, building owners generally didn't want to monitor their air quality because they didn't really want to be highlighting problems. To be quite frank, they didn't need that headache. Whereas it's completely changed now, and all of a sudden, employees and tenants are saying, "Hold on, I need to know that there's a key safety issue to show that there's enough fresh air in the building." Our monitors measure, amongst other things, the level of CO2. And obviously, if you have a stuffy building with people breathing out CO2, the CO2 levels will go up, and it's a bad indication. It's a very bad indication for air quality within a building. The trend we've seen in the last few weeks is energy consumption starting to rocket back up in buildings, because tenants are saying, well, we need the air conditioning on 24/7, full air exchanges and all of that in order to ensure that the air is safe. I don't think it's kind of going sustainability in the wrong direction. So what they're looking at doing, and what they are doing now, is saying, well, actually, we need to install CO2 monitors to prove to the occupants that we are exchanging fresh air in and out of the building all the time. And that's what's taken off now. That's what's really taken off. And we've all read about the sick building syndrome and all of that, but nobody's necessarily measured it. I think people will be insisting that there's safe measurement, air quality, and there's safe measurement of air going on in all these buildings. And, most of the buildings are fine, but we all know the odd building can be bad.
Yeah, well, look, again, when you're dealing with commercial real estate, particularly in a city like Dublin, you have your mix of new or contemporary buildings, but you also have older buildings that either have been retrofitted or need to be retrofitted. So, there's kind of an added challenge there. So I think that this is certainly an area that's of growing importance to landlords and to commercial occupiers. So I've no doubt that we'll be discussing this with you again. So Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. That was Peter Murphy, co-founder of Ziggytec. We need to take another quick break and we'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
Welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. I'm now joined over the phone from Warsaw and Berlin by Maciej, Markowski and Marley, Fabisiewicz, co-founders of SpaceOS. You're both very welcome. Thank you for joining me today. You truly are an international Irish startup. So perhaps you might start by telling us about SpaceOS. What exactly does SpaceOS do?
Who's first, Maciej? You want to go? I'm happy to. I'm happy to start too. Everything is in the name. SpaceOS is Space Operating System. We enable office building landlords, workspace operators, or flex space operators to run their spaces. And we're really an end-to-end space management system, really increasing the occupier experience for any kind of workspaces.
Okay, we talk a lot about, we cover Proptech and commercial Proptech over really the course of the past 18 months here in the show. And, sometimes the standards can be quite different. So let's get specific about what it is and who you offer this to. So in the commercial space, is it mainly offices that you're dealing with?
Not really specifically. I think what really what makes us differentiate from the rest of the competitors in the industry, that we really cater to offices, to flex spaces, to co-workings, basically any kind of workspace. And, this was also our mission from the beginning, that we understood that all workspaces will require technology to make workspaces more human-centric and more connected.
Okay, very good. And can you give me some examples of how you're doing that? How does that translate into the contemporary office space?
Well, basically, it's all about, getting people connected with the amenities, potentially with the landlord or the workspace operators, and, making the things in their daily routines and their daily lives a bit easier. Now, with the past months and the pandemic, other priorities have surfaced, like, safety, contactless features and things like that. But ultimately, moving forward, we think, we're moving into decentralization of offices and, the work from anywhere kind of mindset. And, we strongly understand and believe that this will be only possible if this is managed with technology. And this is, what we have been building and we have been anticipating, for a long time, but it's going to come now with such a vengeance. Nobody knew about it, but we're very excited to be in this.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one there, because there had been a huge trend towards creating much more appealing office spaces, healthy buildings, workspaces that promoted well-being, so this was a huge focus over the past number of years. And I think it's interesting to see that a lot of the infrastructure that was put in place, the priorities have indeed changed post COVID-19, so that what was maybe the aim of well-being is now crossing over into safety and maybe whether it's infrastructure within the office or technology that will actually ensure that there's no risk of spreading the virus. So actually the priorities have very much changed, but the principles are still the underlying ones. But I suppose before we start and get into what exactly they are, we might just get from the people that you're working with at the moment, where is your system deployed across approximately how many buildings and operators?
Mm-hmm. So it's now deployed in 16 countries across 80 locations. This is around 11 million square feet in total. So it's quite widely used already.
Okay, and I know that of your systems, there's approximately 75,000 users across those 16 countries and 80 locations. So you must have some maybe insights that others wouldn't have in relation to this phased return to work. I mean, are you seeing that the offices that you're currently operating in, have they returned to near full capacity? Are they operating at very low levels of capacity at the moment?
Well, I mean, nobody has returned to full capacity yet, and it's varying from country to country, obviously, with the individual regulations and also, with the state of the pandemic. So I believe we will be transitioning back to the office over the next months, slowly but surely. I think, ultimately, it's really fundamental to ensure the safety of the people and, to also stop the virus spreading. So I think, taking the time and making.
Oh, I'm sorry. The line has dropped off there.
I'm
deploying meanwhile technologies like SpaceOS, to make the workspace safer. I think it's fundamental.
Our audience at home that we are operating remotely, so apologies for any sound quality issues that we might be experiencing. So look, back to really what we need to be focusing on now. I think that, again, there has been a huge trend towards the tenant experience. And I think maybe what, as an industry, we were promoting as the optimum tenant experience 4 months ago is very different today. So for people who are looking at a phased return to their offices, how has the whole concept of a quality tenant experience changed?
I wouldn't say it changed that the old things don't matter anymore. I think just priorities changed. Now, number one, it's of course safety. So if somebody runs an office building, their number one responsibility and number one priority is to make sure that people who come, they'll be safe. So they need to, number one, manage the number of people who are coming, which is, of course, difficult. And that's why we introduced the proactive density management, where you can really make sure that only people who book spaces can show up. Secondly, anything that can be made contactless, well, it should be, and that's from entrance to the lifts, to ability to order food in the restaurant downstairs and pick it up without queuing. So I think these became very important. And thirdly, I mean, this was always important, but I think now it's a key issue. It's communication. So really being able to communicate the hygiene standards, communicate with the tenants that they can expect a safe office environment, and that they can ask any questions, and the best practices can be shared with them. So I would say you still want, the main goal of tenant experience was allowing any occupier coming to the building to have ability to do many more things with their phone or with their laptop, and at the same time for the landlord to be much better connected to them and provide much better service. I think it only became paramount now, because without the communication and ability to enable, to have the technology really orchestrate the return to the office, I think we would be in deep, deep trouble. So any building that already introduced that prior to COVID, and we had that feedback from many clients, it was actually much easier for them to manage the offboarding and the onboarding again of people.
And that's something actually that we've seen ourselves locally, that the experience has been, those that were set up to do it obviously have had a natural advantage. Now, I'm referring, of course, there to the tenant experience, but you actually describe SpaceOS as an operating system for commercial real estate rather than a tenant experience platform. For contemporary offices, what is the distinction?
I think, we all started, with the vision that every building, every office, every workspace will have an app that connects its tenants, its members with the amenities, with the landlord. That was the phase of tenant experience. And I think now we understood that we need to create a holistic experience, and that required to build a platform that is able to integrate building technologies, hardware like access control, HVAC, also software systems. And this is the area we're moving into. We became a platform with powerful APIs, being able to exchange, synchronize, and harmonize data across various systems. And that's, where the transition is happening right now, from a tenant experience app to a platform to really an operating system. And that's what we are becoming. I think also one fundamental thing, what is changing, what we're doing right now is we're moving more into the operational part of the business, ultimately really handing the lease processes and allowing landlords to have a full inventory of their offices in SpaceOS and being able to market, sell, and manage these. So, we're really managing also all the procurement processes nowadays, instead of, just the communication and
so
these things.
To make sure that I understand it, because obviously we want our audience to understand it fully as well. In terms of when you talk about procurement, then does that mean that you're getting into the realm of, maybe issue reporting when there's an issue within the commercial building, so that, that's coming from the tenant experience side. If people experience an issue, they can report it. So your system goes right the way through to addressing that, responding to it, communicating, and then even procuring where needed?
So I would say we go much deeper than that. So we actually enable management of the full occupier life cycle, which means the CRM, the issuing of offers, managing offers, signing of the leasing contracts, and then automating invoicing. So you can really run your building fully from SpaceOS, which is a huge part of our system now. which I wouldn't at all include under the tenant experience banner. This became actually really, really important since the COVID situation, because more and more landlords consider already doing it to turn part of their space into to flex space, to offer short-term leases, and we enable them to do that very, very easily. So, and another part that I think sets us apart from just purely tenant experience solutions is the platform side of things. So if you want to integrate BMS, if you want to integrate your HVAC systems, if you want to integrate access control, parking, lifts, and have a single command control center and really gather a single pool of data to have an overview of what's happening in your building, well, we enable that. I think that's quite far and from just purely a solution that makes being in a building nicer, which is also very important. Mm-hmm. But we believe that with true value can be brought when you take it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And
but what you just said, Carol, if I may just come back, you asked for support and FM issue management. We had this already from the beginning. I mean, we implemented a very simple support ticketing system in the beginning, which was a chat, and the first time in history, tenants were able to report instantly in a chat interface when they had a problem with, I don't know, the toilet, the light bulb, or the AC, right? That was usually not the case. A couple of years ago, they still used to send a fax. So, we really moved into this area to have a direct communication. And then we understood very quickly that the facility management systems are usually, quite outdated technology with a very bad user experience. So we have extended this part of issue reporting and facility management on our side, and are basically allowing for full end-to-end
just
facility
before we actually came on air, I was trying to find out the ratio or the spread of you going into new buildings or whether retrofitting on older buildings. So you indicated there that there's a nice spread. So this is not just technology for newly developed commercial building. You're actually going in and retrofitting older buildings?
We're a cloud-based solution, so we can deploy anywhere, right? So for us, there is no restrictions in that area. Personally, I like industrial revitalized buildings. I actually prefer them over completely new buildings these days because they have something special, they have a history, and they just create a different vibe and atmosphere. But ultimately, we're totally flexible. I mean, usually it's not about us, but the technologies around us, which have to be retrofitted, like access control or modern HVAC system, which can communicate with our system through an API. Because unfortunately, this is still not standard in the industry. Yeah. Okay. That all these building technologies do have an API and are able to communicate.
This sector of PropTech, it's one that is maturing fast. So, I mean, where next for SpaceOS? Over the next 12 months, and I understand that's a difficult situation. That's a difficult question to ask. In light of the fact that we don't really know the full impact of the pandemic and how that's going to shape future use. But from where we are today, how do you see this space advancing?
So literally the world changed in a couple of days over the last months, right? However, it's going to take time until we really see the change, because ultimately what will be happening, I think, big offices will be decentralized, people will be working from anywhere, but this still has to happen. It's not going to be happening over a couple of days. This will be happening over the next years to come. And, same applies obviously for the technology implementation. I think, the need is ultimately there. And I think, for us, it's been really a positive momentum where, our message, our vision suddenly was put on fast forward over the past week. And right now, everybody understands that without such technologies, they won't be able to compete in the future in the market. But, we're just excited that we can help, make, offices and workspaces more safe, more efficient, and more collaborative and more human-centric. And that's I think is the biggest value we are bringing today. And that makes us the most
That's a really important one. I'm sorry, Marley, did you want to come in there?
Maciej.
Oh, Maciej.
Yes. I wanted to add one thing. So regarding the next 12 months, I'm seeing three things, right? Mm-hmm. Number one, I believe this field will continue growing, that solutions like ours will become table stakes for the industry. Just even from the occupier experience point of view, why is it harder to order food from a restaurant downstairs than from across town? Why is it harder to report an issue in your own building than a broken package from Amazon, right? So I think this really will become a standard, like the LEED certificate became standard some time ago. So that's one. Number two, I believe a lot that will happen in the next 12 months will, of course, relate to COVID. Our whole roadmap was significantly amended to enable integration of air quality sensors, desk booking, proactive occupier management, to enable even things like contact tracing. Exactly, thanks.
Density management and occupancy management.
I also think for this space that demand for short-term leases will really change this industry. And I think this is strongly estimated now. I think a lot of co-working players are struggling right now because, of course, they have the shortest leases. But I think long-term, there will be a huge demand for flexibility. And I think it will be very hard to manage for any office building without a solution like SpaceOS.
Plenty to think about there. Maciej and Marley, my thanks again for joining us today to talk about SpaceOS. That's it from us today. Thank you for listening in to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can get in touch with the show on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Also, my thanks to Peter Rice on sound and show producer Katie Tallon of Hear Me Roar Media. We're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Tallon, and all the team here, stay safe. 3,